What is going on, Law Nation? Welcome to a new episode. Yet another great day to be alive, and I just want to thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, please, I just want to invite you to go to escapethebillable.com and snag our free passive investing guide. Again, it's absolutely free, and it has some incredible insider content that I know you'll find useful. Today, we take a deep dive into our guest's story as a former big law firm attorney. It's a story that many of us can relate to, whether we are attorneys or not. Many of us have successful careers and earn a good income, but it comes at a price. It comes at the price of time, relationships, and perhaps even our health. And many times, there is this big gap between who we are in our professional life and who we really are in real life. Now, I've been told that the bigger that gap is, the more likely we are unhappy, and the bigger the gap is, the unhappier we are. If that sounds like something that you can relate to, then this episode is for you. Jonathan Twombly is a Columbia law grad and former big law firm attorney. He's the president of Two Bridges Asset Management, LLC, a multifamily syndication firm in New York City specializing in assets in the southeastern U.S. Jonathan is also the founder of the Multifamily Launchpad coaching platform. All right, let's jump in.
This is the Passive Income Attorney Podcast, where you'll discover the secrets and strategies of the ultra wealthy on how they build streams of passive income to give them the freedom we all want. Attorney Seth Bradley will help you end the cycle of trading your time for money so you can make money while you sleep. Start living the good life on your own terms. Now, here's your host, Seth Bradley.
Jonathan, what's going on, man? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure. Let's dive right in, brother. So tell us a little bit about your story. And, you've had a pretty illustrious career and transition out. So, feel free to brag a little bit.
I don't know what there is to brag about, really, but I thank you for the kind words. I was practicing attorney. I did commercial litigation for about 12 years in different kind of big firms here in New York and also in Boston and in London for a while. Some pretty high profile litigation, but I was really really run down by the grind of it, right? And
sure.
And that kind of narrow, tiny eye of the needle for partnership. And it just over time, I started out all kind of full of piss and vinegar and was really into it. But then after about the third year or so, when I started hitting that mid-level status, it just started to become a real grind. And, just realized it really wasn't for me. I found that I was really too entrepreneurial for big law. There really wasn't any opportunity to do something new, right? Especially in litigation, it's just like you just do the litigation, right? But there wasn't. I always wanted to be in a position where it's like, hey, there's like a gazillion green widgets out there, but nobody's ever made a blue one. Why don't I make a blue one? And it's like not the way that law works. And I wasn't interested enough in law to like go out and hang my own shingle or something. So I had been looking for a bunch of ways to get out. I quit a couple of times, always wound up coming back in. I felt like, in The Godfather, like every time I get out, they just pull me back in, it was sort of like that kind of, that kind of situation. And finally in 2011, so in 2009, 2008, 2009, we had the financial crisis. And it was kind of a weird experience because I'd been through the dot-com crash, and during the dot-com crash, we just got busier, right? In litigation, like everybody was looking for somebody to blame. And there was like plenty of fighting going on. The great financial crisis was so bad that nobody wanted to sue anybody. They didn't want to spend the legal bills to like take a chance to collect money. So we were gearing up for this big wave of litigation that just never came. And so after about 2 years of me just sitting around doing nothing, and like I was literally like surfing the internet looking at real estate deals, trying to figure out how I could escape my job as a real estate investor. After 2 years of that, that my firm finally decided like they really didn't want to pay me $300,000 a year to sit around surfing the internet. So they let me go. And it's funny. I remember that meeting where I don't know if anybody's ever been through being terminated, but they always do it with two people. Like they never terminate you one-on-one because they want to have a witness there. And I just remember like the two guys whose job it was to let me go, they were just like so morose and like they were so like, this is terrible. We feel really bad about it. And I was like, woohoo, like, you're firing me. This is great. I'm getting 4 months of severance out of this. And like, I'm out of this job that I've been trying to quit. I'd actually tried to quit before and they talked me out of it, even though I had no work to do. And then, so finally they let me go. And I was like, okay, finally I'm out. And at that point I really wasn't interested in trying to find another law job. I was kind of in this situation where I was like, how on earth am I going to convince somebody to hire me for a job I don't want, And so I was fortunate enough that I'd always lived really well within my means. I had money saved up, and I started doing a lot of networking about real estate because I decided that's what I wanted to do, and met somebody who wanted to start up a real estate business. And once you're a lawyer, you can't escape it, right? So I have that kind of like need to do due diligence and like need to check all the boxes kind of thing. And so rather than just jump into the offer of like, hey, let's be partners, I trotted her around to a bunch of people and said, what do you think about this? Some people I trusted to kind of do due diligence. And the effect of that was they all said, we think she's really good. She knows what she's talking about. And if you decide to join up with her, we'll give you money to invest. So I actually wound up with like a partner and investors all at the same time, decided to jump into it. And that's how I got my start. Now there's like a lot more that happened after that, but that's basically how I made the transition from being a lawyer into real estate. Was, got myself fired for step one, get yourself fired. And then step two, like do a lot of networking until you find somebody to partner up with. But yeah, it was like lots of lucky happenstances, I'd say.
Gotcha. Easy two-step process there, right?
Easy two-step. Anybody can repeat this process. It's very easy.
Yeah. There it is. You got the keys to the castle right there. Yeah. So what kind of turned you on to real estate? You said you were kind of sitting around twiddling your thumbs and didn't have anything to do with respect to your law practice, and you started looking at real estate deals. I mean, what kind of turned you on to that?
Well, I mean, I'd always been interested in it, right? I mean, it seemed like a way to make money without killing myself, right? And of course, I think when I first started out and didn't know anything, I thought of it as being passive, right? Which I didn't realize it's passive if like you're the owner. You can make it passive if you hire someone like me to do it for you, but it's not passive if you're doing it yourself. But it's also not like high effort, right? It's not it's not like being a lawyer where you're working for 14 hours a day. Like, there's some bursts of activity and things you got to stay on top of, but it's not a career that's going to kill you from overwork. Even if you're doing it yourself. But I had been just really interested in the idea of like owning assets that produce cash flow. And I always liked buildings anyway. So my dad is an architectural historian. I spent a lot of time as a kid, like looking at buildings, talking about buildings, helped my dad restore his house, which was like a 200-year-old farmhouse. Like I just really liked buildings. So the opportunity to try to make money from buildings just was kind of a no-brainer for me. So, I just always really liked the idea. And that's what I'd been really trying to think about. So before all that happened with the financial crisis and stuff, I'd really been planning my transition out. And I just always been interested in different kinds of investing. And I guess my thought originally was, I'd really like to become an equities investor and go work for like a fund or something. And then what I found with that was like, I was just basically too old to transition into that. And, that's what people were telling me. They're just like, look, you got a great resume, but no, like, you're like in your late 30s, you've got kids, like no 27-year-old manager is going to feel is going to feel able to tell you to work late, right?
Yeah.
And that's who you're going to have to be working for, and like it's just going to be really hard to break in. So then I started shifting my focus to real estate. So I'd actually been kind of like talking about it to a lot of people before I actually got terminated, because I was still trying to figure out how do I get out of this. But as long as, even in 2011, the economy wasn't great. I mean, we were officially in a recovery, but it wasn't like, all like happy times, right? And so I was, grateful to have a job and have a salary at that time, and trying to bank every cent I could, because I didn't know how long it was going to last. So it wasn't like getting terminated was a shock. I mean, I was more surprised that they hadn't done it earlier.
Right. Things were slow. Yeah,
things were slow. And frankly, like I think that, how law firms are, they're like so conservative and scared of everything. I think they might have even held off because like we had just had a baby and they were like afraid of getting like sued for some kind of like, who knows what they could get sued for. So it took them longer than it would have taken me to fire me.
Yeah.
So,
But I was about to say, they ended up doing you a favor because, you were wanted out anyways, and you were like, oh, you just sigh of relief.
Yeah. And the thing is, look, I mean, it's the golden handcuffs problem was definitely there too, right? I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about how can I get out, but what would pay me as much as this? And I'm kind of stuck here. And honestly, what I found was sort of like an interesting phenomenon. Like when I was still in the job, my ideas of what I could do next were very limited, because I was saying, well, what else is going to pay me this much? Like what can I step into that's going to pay the same salary right off the bat? And I was like, well, I could become a management consultant maybe. And I looked at jobs like that. Or I could go, try to work for a private equity fund or a hedge fund. And sort of like, that's it. There were like two jobs I could do, right, that I could think of. And that made it very difficult for me to try to find the next thing. After I got terminated, suddenly like the world is my oyster, because my income now I didn't have the golden handcuffs anymore. So I remember like sitting home and like in New York, they I don't know if they still do, but they used to have these ads on TV in the middle of the day for this place called Apex Technical School, where they teach you how to like, service like air conditioners and rebuild engines and all kind. And so like, I went from like thinking like I could only be a management consultant to like sitting home watching like, TV in the middle of the day, and the Apex Tech or commercial comes on and like, oh, I could do that. Like I could do anything. Like suddenly like everything was a possibility. Right. So, sometimes, I mean, like my advice to people who are like in a law job that they really don't like, and they feel themselves really constrained. Like I understand totally, if you've got a family and you've got a mortgage, you can't just quit your job. But if you're in a position where you can, sometimes that is the thing that you need to do to get yourself like the mental space where you can actually start being creative about what you're going to do next. Yeah. So, it's something, if you're really unhappy, walking away is an option. I mean, I did it, and it's, I before I got fired, I walked away previously. Like I said, I went back because I couldn't figure out what to do at the time, but like, it's an option, and it could actually work in your favor if you're really, really just miserable. So,
yeah. And if you kind of have an entrepreneurial mindset, it's tough to kind of let that mindset out when you're working, 60 hours a week, or working a big law job, or being a doctor or something like that. You just don't have time to think creatively and think about, well, how else can I make money? Well, how can I do this? How can I do that? You don't have time to even think about those things.
Yeah, it's very hard. And even if you're thinking like, hey, well, I'll go and buy, some real estate on the side, it's like really hard to find the time to go find the properties and do the due diligence and arrange for the financing and everything. And that's why if you're the kind of person who's thinking like, well, I want to create a glide path for myself of alternate streams of income, then, going the passive route could be really a way to accomplish that. It's going to take a bit longer, but you could start, if you're kind of diligent and investing, your spare cash every year into other deals, you could create enough passive income so that maybe you can't quite replace your income yet, but you can give yourself enough of a cushion that you've got your basic expenses covered,
Right.
And then that gives you, after, say 5 years or so of doing that diligently, uh, you know, you could wind up being able to, at that point, say, okay, I've got enough to keep the lights on at home, and now I can go do something else.
Right. And that's sage advice. I mean, everybody always says like, and you should, if you have a really good job, even if you hate it, maybe you invest passively first, see how it goes, get your feet wet, see if you like it, and then replace your income little by little. And then if you really start loving it and you want to get into the active side, then get into the active side. But for now, it's tough to just kind of just stop because of those golden handcuffs, like you talked about. It's tough. And it sounds like from your position though, at least you didn't have, multiple mortgages and all these different bills that you had to pay, so it was like, hey, I'm actually okay.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I remember having conversations with my colleagues, and I was the sole breadwinner for my family. My wife didn't work; she was home with the kids, and we were living on like half of my income, and we're perfectly happy,
Yeah.
and just banking money. And I remember talking with my colleagues who were like complaining about not having any money, and I was like, well, I know you make the same amount of money as me. And I
Yeah.
also know that your wife is also a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it is. So basically you're making twice as much money as I am. And so how could you possibly not have it? Like if I were in your shoes, I'd be banking like 3/4 of our salary and like living on 1/4 of it. Like, what do you got? What's going on? And then when you talk to them, it was like, well, they both have an Audi, right?
Right.
They've also got the house in the Hamptons, right? And all the kids are in private school. And like they basically and they were taking really expensive vacations when they went, and they ate out all the time. And it was like, well, no wonder you don't have any money, right? I mean, you're spending every cent that comes in, and you think you're doing something because you max out your 401k, right? And that's it. And you're just not. Yeah, you're not living beyond your means, but if you're spending every cent, you're not putting yourself in a position to, like not putting yourself in a position to save and to be able to escape. I was just always like, I've had the benefit of like my entire life just being like a real cheapskate when it comes to certain things. Like I just never wanted to pay a lot of rent. Like I just always thought like this just doesn't make any sense to me. So I was always looking for like the cheapest place that I could live in. And even after I got married too, I mean, but that was good. We just weren't throwing money down the drain for rent. So that allowed us then to, when we bought our house, we have like practically no mortgage, so those are and I never felt like I was sacrificing. I mean, just especially if you're working at a big law firm, you should be able to do that, but you have to make certain choices that are, paying yourself rather than paying other people.
Right. And most of us don't do that. I mean, just maxing out your 401k is not enough. I mean, that's for later. That's for when you're 65 years old. And I don't know if most people still think about it that way. Like, hey, 65, I'm going to work till then or not. But if you get tired of it, early in your 30s and you're like, whoa, I made a mistake, I've got to figure out a way out. Then you're like, whoa, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah. And I just remember like being in my 30s and thinking about retirement every single day. And I realized like, I'm wishing the rest of my life away. Like I'm wishing away the next 30 years of my life. That's crazy. Like it's short and I might not make it. Like I could get hit by a bus at any moment. So like, why am I living my life thinking of, for 30 years from now? So you gotta live your life for today and set your life up so that you're able to enjoy it. Now, obviously, if you enjoy being a lawyer, you don't have any of these problems. But if you're not happy, really don't make excuses to be stuck in a job that's like sucking your soul away.
Right. And even if you enjoy it, you might not enjoy it 20 or 30 years from now,
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
when you're young and you get started at a big law firm or something, it's all kind of new and it's all like, oh, okay, you're kind of in this whirlwind and you're like, all right, well, I can do this. And then that grind hits and those 200 billable hour months start piling up and you're like, oh, I don't know about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how has being an attorney kind of helped you on your venture into real estate investing?
So in ways I didn't expect. So like people always ask me like, oh, you're a lawyer, so do you do your own legal work? Like, no way. Like I didn't want to do my legal work when I was a lawyer. There's no way I'm going to do it now. Plus the thing is I'm not qualified to do it. Like, I was a commercial litigator. I wasn't a real estate closing lawyer. I wasn't an SEC lawyer for doing private offerings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know enough to know that I don't know anything about those things, and I hand them off to the professionals who really understand them, because I don't want to have them come, bite me in the ass later. So I hand them off to the people who know what they're doing. But the ways that it has helped me are things like with marketing, right? Like, and things like putting together documents. And what I'm talking about is like, not the legal offering materials for my deals, but the marketing offering materials for my deals tend to be a lot more thorough and kind of thought out than most of what you see out there. Mm-hmm. It also, I have a different attitude too. Like I think a lot of people, unfortunately, in this business really think of their investors as just sort of a means to an end. It's just like it's like somebody's face got a big dollar sign on it, and that's all they're really thinking of. Okay, this guy is going to write me a check for X, and then that means I can do this deal. I really have like a fiduciary approach to investors because I was trained as a fiduciary, and I really believe that my investors come first, their interests come first. If I have a conflict between my interests and their interests come first, and I take it really, really seriously. I like really believe in it. So I think that, and that's not something that like, I'm not sure that people can tell when they're dealing with me, or they even know, because it's not like I share my private thoughts with investors about these choices that I make. But I hope that somehow it comes through in the way that people feel when they deal with me, or just the general, sort of attitude. But it's not, I don't view people just as like, as cogs in my wheel. And I think there's a lot of people who in the business who do. It's just they're just on this kind of money raising, machine, and it's all about raising money and getting fees. And I feel like this is about taking somebody's money into my trust and making sure that it's protected and that it does as well as possible. And so I just have a different attitude, I think, because of being a lawyer.
Yeah, I love that explanation of your approach, man. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you've got to take care of other people's money more so than your own. I mean, if you're taking responsibility for their money, that's high and above even yourself. I mean, you're not putting yourself at risk. You're putting somebody else's retirement money and, their savings at risk, and it's under your control.
Yeah. I mean, I remember one of the partners that I worked for here in New York that I really liked. I remember him talking about his law practice the same way. He's like, this is a sacred trust. If somebody comes to me with a big problem with their business, and maybe it's, this could be like a bet the company case for them.
Yeah.
Right. And they've come to me out of everybody they could have come to say, hey, Larry, help me. That's a sacred trust. And I feel the same way with people who come to me with their money to invest. Like, they've worked hard for that money. They may need that money later for their kids' education or for retirement or whatever. It doesn't matter what they need it for. The fact is, it's their money. They worked hard for it. And if they're coming to me with it to say, hey, Jonathan, I want to invest with you, then that's a sacred trust. So, that's how I treat it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. I know we touched on a little bit earlier, but, what are kind of your thoughts about, active versus passive real estate investing, and how it might apply to, other attorneys or doctors or dentists that are busy, even if they may or may not want to transition out, but, just to get started.
Well, I guess, so there's a lot of things to think about here. I think that one of the mistakes that like highly educated, highly qualified professionals make is to think that real estate is really easy, or that because they're so smart and educated and professional, they can handle it without really making a lot of effort. Like, I think they kind of look down on it as, certainly, like I did too. When I was a lawyer, I thought about like the real estate guys. Like, I never thought they were as smart as us, but the fact of the matter is, it doesn't mean that it isn't hard, and it doesn't have moving parts, and it doesn't have things that you have to think about. So I always think of sort of the classic, and I don't mean to pick on dentists, but I mean, this is just, I just always think of it this way, as like the four dentists partnership, right? Where you have like four dentists who get together and they pool together a couple of $1 million and they buy a real estate asset, and they think this is going to be great because it's so easy, it's easy. It's a lot less complicated than running a dental practice. Like, it'll just run itself. And then the property gets run into the ground because they're not really either focused on it or competent enough to run it. And I mean, I've seen this happen. Someone I used to know here in the city with a real estate business, one of the best deals that she and her husband used to buy multifamily and rehab it and stuff. One of the best deals they ever got was a deal that was owned by a Wall Street guy, right? And he bought this property. It was like in Jersey City. First year it did great. Second year it did okay. Third year it was breaking even. Fourth year it was losing money. And they bought it when it was losing money. What they were told was, it couldn't be rented. Like nobody wanted to live there, right? Turned out that was just a complete lie. The place was full. When they started doing their due diligence, they found that the place was full. The property manager had been just pocketing the rent and telling the owner, I can't rent this. This place is, you bought a dump. Nobody wants to live in. And that's because, he was convinced that it was easy and he didn't have to do anything. And he had a property manager in place. So everything was fine. And he wound up like not only losing, he lost a lot of money on that deal because he sold it probably for less than what he bought it because he was convinced that it wasn't worth anything because that's what his property manager was telling him. So those are the kinds of things that you have to look out for if you are trying to do it actively, right? You have to understand that there's more to it than just having people send you checks. There's more. You have to be on top of your asset. You have to be focused, and that takes some time. And it may not be as complicated as practicing law, but it still has its own complications. So if you want to do it actively, you have to really be sure that you're going to be on top of it. That's my advice. If you don't want the headache, right? If you don't want the headache of being on top of it, then you should invest with someone else whose job it is to be on top of it and take care of the headaches. So the only way that this business, people think of real estate as passive, but the only way that it is passive is if you hire somebody else to do the work that's involved. Then it can be truly passive. So go work with a syndicator, or go invest in a REIT, or a fund or something, and then it's truly passive. But the minute that you own it in your own name, it ceases to be passive, even if you have a property manager, because you still have to manage the manager. So that's my advice on the kind of which way you should go. Really depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, what you want to do and what you have time for. I mean, it's not open heart surgery. It's not bet the farm litigation. It's not that complicated, but it does have intricacies that you need to learn. And there are experts that already know how to do it. And it's better to learn from them first before you kind of dive in and lose your farm, Yeah,
you just have to stay on top of stuff. That's the important thing. And sometimes, if you're in the middle of the company litigation and you're going to trial in 6 weeks, things can slip and you don't really want to be in that situation.
Yeah. So did you ever get kind of pigeonholed into investing into traditional assets rather than, looking at alternative assets like real estate, or did you never even kind of venture into that kind of stuff?
You mean for my own portfolio or for...
Yeah. I guess, when you were working at a big firm and then even now.
Yeah. I mean, when I was working at a big firm, it just never really occurred to me that I could invest in real estate. Right. I just was just like, okay, 401k there, that's what you invest in. Yeah. And I never knew about this whole world of like syndication, syndicated real estate deals. So I'd never heard of it. I didn't actually hear about it till after, ironically enough, I told you the story about finding my first partner in the business. I was so, living in New York, living in Brooklyn, talking with other attorneys about the kind of stuff that they were doing. I just kind of thought that we were just going to be buying brownstones in Brooklyn and like rehabbing them or something. it's amazing. I got into business with her without actually knowing what we were talking about. So we started up, and she was like, no, we're going to buy these, 150 unit properties in the South, uh, through this syndication model and use other people's money and stuff. And I was like, really, we can do that?
Oh.
So, but that's how I got started in it. So, but I didn't know about the whole world of like these syndication deals, or sometimes they're called club deals or private deals, until I actually started in the business myself. Then I found out that they existed, and it would have been a great thing to invest in previously. I wish I had, been doing that in 2001, 2002, when I was a new lawyer.
Yeah. And so we kind of talked about this before the call, but attorneys are relatively conservative by nature. I mean, how do we get them to kind of overcome that mindset of just invest in traditional stocks and bonds and kind of put your head down and work and just depend on one active income stream? I mean, how do we kind of get them over that hump?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think they should be diversified across different things, right? I'm not saying like don't invest in stocks and bonds and stuff. Like you should keep on doing that, but I think people should be open to other things, and I think they should understand that real estate is a pretty conservative investment, actually.
Right.
And what makes it conservative is that it's based on cash flows that are existing. Now, there's all kinds of different ways you can invest. You can invest in more speculative things like flipping houses. You can, I don't advise this, but a lot of people think that this is real estate investing, like go try to buy in a place you think is going to gentrify, so it's going to go up. That's very speculative. That's not what I'm talking about. If you're investing for cash flow with somebody who's experienced at managing these assets, it's a very conservative play, relatively speaking. There was a great study. It's a little outdated now, but I think it's still valid. It's like 2013 and 2014, JP Morgan put out a study of commercial real estate over a 35-year period. So it was like from 1977 to 2012. So it actually included the great crash, the real estate crash of the Great Recession, included the crash of the 1980s. And what they concluded was that commercial real estate, cash flowing commercial real estate, was almost as secure as bonds, but had the upside of equities. So it kind of was the best of both worlds because of being secured by a physical asset. And physical assets like real estate don't tend to go out of business the way that like businesses do, right? So the chances, if you're dealing with somebody who's experienced and who has a conservative frame of mind, the chances of you losing your money are pretty slim compared to other things out there. Not that it couldn't happen, but it's pretty slim because you're always secured by that underlying real estate. And having to invest for cash flow kind of bakes in a level of conservatism to your asset, because you have to evaluate it based on, well, how much return do I want to get out of this asset? So that kind of gives you a narrower range of operations. But it's paying you cash every month or every quarter, like a bond would, and it has the upside appreciation potential. And in commercial real estate, that's not speculative the way it is. Like if you're saying, like, oh, I'm going to just go buy a brownstone in Brooklyn, like, a mile past where it's been gentrified already, because I think it's going to get there, may never get there, or it may take a lot longer than you think to get there. Commercial real estate appreciation is based on rent growth over time. And we know that rents grow over time. It's not based on like a single family house where it's dependent on, the value of your house is dependent on what somebody paid for the house next door, right? That's not the case in commercial real estate. The value is dependent on how much rent people will pay. And we know that rents they rise over time with inflation. So values rise according to your rent growth. And it's a lot less speculative and uncertain than like, hoping the gentrification gets there, or hoping that your neighbor sells their house for a lot more money, or whatever it is. So I think it is a conservative investment for conservative minded people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there's a common general misconception that real estate is risky. And that's just simply not true. I mean, some sorts of real estate are risky, just like anything else. But, having one stream of income to me is the riskiest thing you can do. I
Yeah.
mean, you experienced it yourself. I've experienced it. I mean, you've experienced, layoffs and, industry shifts and things like that, where you're just left with nothing because you only have one stream of income.
Right. I want to kind of like make an analogy here. The reason why I think a lot of people think that real estate is risky and speculative, like every lawyer who's listening to this has, you know, gotten the lawyer jokes, right? Or they understand the bad perception of lawyers in general society, right? Even when you're like working at a big firm and you've been to like top school and you have like the highest ethical standards and you're working on the most complex stuff and really sophisticated people, you go to Thanksgiving with your cousins and they're like, oh, you're a lawyer, and they make stupid lawyer jokes, or they think all lawyers are, shysters. And the reason is because 99% of people, when they deal with a lawyer, they're not dealing with someone like you. They're dealing with like the ambulance chasers and, those people who who give the industry a bad name. Right. So what those guys have to do and what you are doing, it's night and day. There's nothing, they don't have anything to do with each other, but you get all wrapped up into it. It's the same thing with real estate. What most people think of as real estate is what they see on TV, like on HGTV or whatever. And they see these flipping shows, right? And they see stuff like that. So they think it's like you've got to go and spend $500,000 to buy something and you're going to sink another $200,000 into it to rehab it. And then, you hope somebody buys it and that's not, so of course it seems risky, right? And I'm sure everybody has heard the story of like their colleague who bought a building and they lost money on it. If they don't know what they're doing, your chances of losing money are very high, right? Yep. And the reason that happens is because people think it's easy and it's not, right? And then they think it's risky, so it's like either they think it's really easy or they think it's really risky, and both of those things are wrong. But it's because of what they're exposed to, and they're not exposed to commercial property, whether it's multifamily like I do, or whether it's hotels, or whether it's industrial property, or whether it's triple net leases, or whatever the case may be. They're just not exposed to the more sophisticated variety, the investment grade, real estate. So if they understood that better, I think they would have a better understanding of the risk profile and they'd have a different perception of the risk.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you invest with experts who have a track record, have done it before, who know what they're doing, and don't just go out on a limb and do it yourself, then, that mitigates that risk, tenfold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, let's jump into the Freedom 4.
It's time for the Freedom 4.
So what's the best thing you do to keep your mind and body healthy?
Well, before COVID, I was going to the gym regularly. That was, I have not been to the gym since this hit, unfortunately, but
it's tough.
Yeah, it's very tough. So it's been a tough year, I have to say, for the health piece of it. But, try to eat healthy and I don't eat a lot of junk food and stuff. So that's one thing there.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I'm actually a gym owner myself. So we've been open, closed, inside, outside, just trying to stay flexible. It's just, it's been a crazy year.
I'm sure it's been tough.
Yeah. So in an alternative universe where you weren't involved in real estate, what would you be doing?
I think I'd be a behavioral economist.
Okay.
I really am interested in behavioral economy. I think it's behavioral economics. I think it's really, really, really interesting.
Nice. You wouldn't be a big law firm litigator?
No. God, no.
Nice. So where were you at 5 years ago, and where do you see yourself and your business 5 years from now?
Yeah, well, 5 years ago, let's see, that's 2015. I was kind of getting going in this business. So I was still sort of in startup mode. 5 years from now, I think where I'd like to be is really have a couple thousand units under management and have more of a team that I can delegate stuff to, so I can really be focused on the kind of high level thinking, strategic thinking, and not as much in the day to day.
Sounds like a plan. How has passive income made your life better?
Well, gosh, I mean, I have, it's not exactly passive for me because I'm doing it actively, but let's just make sure that, kind of make that clear. However, the real estate, as I said, is not, once you own the assets, it is not very time intensive. So what that has allowed me to do is really have pretty much complete freedom over my time, which is really the thing that I craved most. I mean, more than money. I think the long-term upside of this business is probably at least as good, if not better, than being in law and being a law partner. In the short term, it has. I mean, it definitely took a step back in income, but that doesn't actually I'm not motivated by money. I'm really motivated by the time and the freedom. Sure. So just being able to, like, for example, last week, the New York City schools were shut down because of COVID. And, we'd been planning to go to our house upstate for Thanksgiving anyway, but we're like, oh, well, we'll just go early then. Right. And so, like, cause I don't have any place to be, I can do this business from anywhere. And frankly, there's not so much keeping me busy that I can't just take a couple of days off and not think about business for a couple of days if I feel like it. There's nothing to stop me from doing that. So I really have just tremendous flexibility to do what I want, when I want, where I want. The downside of that is that my wife also knows that. So she's constantly asking me to do stuff. And I'm like, well, honey, I really should be working. But, sometimes it's a little hard to be like, well, I should be working, but I don't actually have to be working right now. So yes, I can do the thing you asked me to do.
Yeah.
But
I get the same thing, man.
Yeah.
She's like, well, you're working from home.
Yeah, exactly.
You have time to do this.
So, yeah. When I was a lawyer, that was never a possibility, so, cause it was just work all the time. But so that's the biggest and best life change for me.
Yeah. It's really about freedom of your time.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Jonathan, I really appreciate you coming on today, man. Where can our listeners find out more about you?
Yeah. So if you are interested in learning more about investments with us, my company is called Two Bridges Asset Management. Probably the easiest way to find us is just Googling us, but the URL, if you want to go, is Two Bridges spelled out with MGMT, short for management.com. So twobridgesmanagement.com. If you go to the website, you'll see a place where investors can click on and fill out a qualification form, and then we can schedule a call if you're interested. So hopefully I'll hear from some of you. And if not, you can always reach out and ask me questions about real estate too. That's just fine as well.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate it. Stay warm over there.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate the invitation.
For sure, man. Yes, sir. Coming from a large law firm, Jonathan's story hits near and dear to my heart. He just kept getting pulled back into a career that he knew was not the right fit for him, but through a shift in mindset and display of perseverance to discover his true calling, he fought his way out and is now on a rocket ship. Now, I know this isn't everyone, and to a certain degree, it's not me either. I didn't love the big law firm life, but I do enjoy practicing law, and I think some of us can relate to that. And I'm not trying to talk you out of continuing your successful career. Instead, my hope is that you listen to this show and it motivates you to stop investing for retirement when you're 65, but instead start investing with the goal to live life now. You've worked hard to get where you are. You probably make a good income. Use that success and that income to buy cash flowing alternative assets that pay out today and in the near future. Give yourself the option to be free, to live life on your own terms, to work when you want to. All right, get over to escapethebillable.com right now and download the absolutely free guide to passive investing in alternative assets to get the ball rolling today. Signing off, celebrate the journey.
Thank you for listening to the Passive Income Attorney Podcast with Seth Bradley. Do you want more ideas on how to generate multiple streams of passive income? Then jump over to passiveincomeattorney.com for show notes and resources. Then apply for the private Facebook community by searching for the Passive Income Attorney on Facebook. And we'll see you on the next episode.